Okay.
Shut the door, or do we keep it open?
All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today with me is Vincent Cassidy from the Institute of Engineering and Technology, my colleague Emily Hart from Syracuse University Libraries, and I'm Annie Rao from Syracuse University Libraries, and we will be talking about research workflows, changing roles, and the challenges it brings, and we're all going to be talking about it from a slightly different perspective of our roles in our individual institutions. So,
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a beautiful day out there, so we'll try and keep this nice and lively so you're not missing the sun. What I want to do is two things. One is we've talked a lot in this conference about the changing nature of scholarly research and the workflow. And what we wanted to focus on, what I want to focus on, is that then how do we understand that, and more critically, what do we do about it? And I guess there's a question underlying that, which is what are the kind of partnerships in this new world that we need to forge? And I speak partly as a kind of straight-up publisher, but also I think, as a role of a learned society, I think we have a special kinship with the libraries and library communities, and I want to try and pull that out. First of all, what about the changing nature of research practice? As I've said here, they're kind of competing forces, different forces, top-down and bottom-up. So political issues to do with funding influence on publication process, technology, distributed, integrated and fragmented technology is changing the way that information is consumed, and then just what's happening to us all, different social behaviours, and a need for always-on information. And all of these three influences are having a different impact, which is making this quite complex change. So for us, our response to that was to try and learn more about it. And what I want to do is to share with you some research that we've undertaken to try and track what's happening out there with our researchers. So I'm going to show you excerpts of a few pieces of research that we've done. This is some research that we did with the IEEE. And on the left side, we asked some basic questions. What did you do this year, the now? And on the right side, how do you think this is going to change over the next few years? And I'll just run through some highlights of that. We can see that what you might call classical behaviour is going to remain broadly unchanged. So 71% of the researchers that we surveyed said that they authored or co-authored a traditional journal article, and that was going to increase, but only increase by a relatively small percentage. When we talk about some of the political or funder-driven changes, you begin to get some quite different responses. So 37% of the researchers had published in an OA journal. That was anticipated to rise by 41% over the next year. That's quite a big, significant transformation. And then when we look at other, let's say, more social behaviours, we see some really quite dramatic changes anticipated. 18% of researchers placing articles in repositories, uploading algorithmic code, uploading data sets. Those are going up in the hundreds of percent as people start anticipating using technology and their social behaviours in a slightly different way. So that's what they do, but what do they value? We did some research with on what do you value. Now you can't see this at the back, so I'll just quickly skip through this. I'll skip through the results. The dark blue is what do you do, what have you used in the last 5 years, and the blue, the light blue, is what do you value. And here we start to see some really quite interesting responses. Journal impact factor, basically publishing in a journal, is highly used and highly valued. The further up that list you get more of the distributed new behaviours, the social behaviours, and you see there's quite a small take-up. But where there is a take-up, it's enormously valued. So reproducibility tools, co-author finders, kudos, some of them are specific services, collaboration tools there. What we're beginning to see then, to understand where we fit into this ecosystem, is really a changing nature of behaviour in terms of the classical scholarly discourse tools and the emerging ones. And then we also asked them, drilling down a bit more into that, what does your funder require from you, where you may require more assistance? And this was kind of interesting. So they need more help in knowledge or technology transfer, where the funder is requesting the researcher to understand what the technology transfer value is. A research impact plan, open access publication, communication to key stakeholders, that might be something that might be facilitated, and we might look at that later by colleagues in the library. And then finally we asked them, is this a time for learner societies to step forward? And we were really exhilarated by this response. So we asked, what do you think, who can help you? And you can see, back a little bit, that learned and scholarly societies were seen above employers, above private funders, above technology, but second only to government as organisations that might help them in this changing environment. And we think that's because that they view us as trusted and independent, and we have longevity. So that's just a little bit of a research, what we did of how we began to assess the changes in the market. What did we do about it? Well, we had to change the way we work. It's no good understanding it if you're going to react to it. We needed to respond to it in a planned way. So we started to develop new ways of working. We're a learned society. We're 150 years old next year. We do things in a traditional way. We've had to try and transform ourselves with new ways of working, what we're calling agile working. We've done that by working alongside channel partners, some are in the room, but also working with libraries to identify who the user personas are and the user types are, so that we can develop services for them. So again, sorry, the publisher in me is deeply offended by the R. I want to run to the screen with a red pen, and this has moved from my computer to Annie, so it's gone a bit scrambled. But broadly, what we've identified are new types of users. It's a classical user here, but we've identified new types of behaviour, not just reading and publishing, but blending this discovery, research and analysis, interdisciplinary discovery, and needing help with funding, collaboration and networking. We've also identified new user types, research directors, senior faculty. They want to do different things in the organisation broadly around impact assessment. And in the corporate world, we've begun to see that it's more solutions focused, more based on insights and more based on what I would call client-side integration. So how can our content, how can our networks be part of the information system within an organisation? So, skipping through this very quickly. We've got the research, we've got our personas. What we need to do is to understand where we might possibly fit into this evolving world. And so we've developed our view of the research workflow. And what I want just to point out to you is this is what we do traditionally. Publications and media that fit into ideation and the ideation discovery phase. And then there is the project planning, looking for funding, finding collaborators, doing the data and analysis of the research, writing that up, publishing it, outreach and communication, communication plan, impact and assessment, and then back around the cycle. And this is where traditionally we have played as the IET. We publish books, we publish journals, we publish discovery databases. The work that we've gone through in terms of looking at the new user behaviors and looking at the pressures, as we talked about earlier on, in terms of the political pressures, technology pressures, and user behavior. We've been looking for new ways that we can become relevant. We don't want to react to the way we see the world, but we want to respond to it in a way which gives us another 150 years of longevity. So we're looking at improving our editorial services, and we've already started that with training and guidance. We've got new people on the ground. We're doing more seminars and trying to coach early career researchers through that publication process. Also, we've launched a new service called Inspect Analytics, which responds to some of the need for insights and impact assessment. We're also looking at things like preprint services, collaboration services, and funding services. Collaboration is particularly relevant to a society. We've got almost 200,000 members, and we are embedded into our communities. If we just saw ourselves as a publisher, we wouldn't necessarily leverage all of the other assets of an organisation. It's got global outreach and got connections into actually many of your organisations. So that's how we've begun to see the world and see how we might fit in. And we see that as part of our mission to become what we're calling an open research institution, which doesn't involve just an open access proposition, but involves connectivity across the workflow. What I want to show you now is just how that's become made live. We recently launched this new service called Inspec Analytics. And what this allows the researcher persona to do is to be able, not just a discovery tool in Inspec, but it allows the researcher to look at their discipline in context. So looking at, this is about, I think, imaging. This example is about image processing, image enhancement. What we can do is look at the process of image enhancement over time, the publication output. We can look at controlled terms, subject classification terms. We can look at the lead organizations that are publishing, the universities and research institutes, the top journals, the top conferences, broader terms, narrower terms, and related subjects. We can also look at, identify the lead conferences where I might need to either have my publications submitted or indeed attend. I can also begin to look for funding to trigger some of those funding requirements that were mentioned earlier on. Look at commercial organizations that are engaging in research on image enhancement. And here we can also look at emerging terms, and I can tell you that convolutional neural networks, if you're interested in image enhancement, is the thing that's taking off, since it wasn't a topic in 2017, and now it's the fastest rising topic in this part of the science base. And so I think that it was important for me to come to this conference with this message, because I think that we've looked for partnerships right the way across our traditional relationships. We've got some colleagues here from Elsevier here, and we work closely with Elsevier. But also, I think this project has helped us to forge different kinds of partnerships with our library colleagues, who we have been partnering with to identify groups of researchers and understand who the users are and what they're doing. I think we share something deep in our DNA, which is that we keep the minutes of research in a very impartial and independent way. We connect people as part of our core mission, and in this world of quite turbulent and dynamic change, I think we're seen as safe harbors. And be keen to take any, I think that's my last slide, keen to take any questions once we get around.
Thanks, Vincent. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Hart. I'm going to advance the slides.
Do you understand?
Okay. Oh, thanks. Sounds good. Okay. So, well, we'll clean them up a little bit. It was hard to do slide prep with Vincent in another country. So. How's everybody? So today I'm bringing the subject librarian perspective to the conversation. I don't think I'm sharing anything groundbreaking, but this is my interpretation, and it feeds well into Annie's piece, which is there have been some recent changes in our department organization to better support research workflow. So anyway, I'm the science and engineering librarian at Syracuse University. My interests lie a lot in the areas of research workflow, research impact, and I do things like systematic reviews, and also I work a lot with graduate student development. So I think these are all my areas of interest specifically do align well with research workflow, I think, and that's just the direction I've taken. But I'm also doing things like collections and instruction from undergraduates all the way to research groups and faculty and scholarly communications. Outreach is kind of a theme that obviously runs through all of these things. And then obviously most subject librarians are also doing their own scholarship as well. So, and again, I can't stress enough that my interpretation of my role is maybe very different from another colleague at Syracuse University, who's a subject librarian. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Anyway, and the other thing about this is that my job changes so much from day to day. So I might be doing a lot of work with graduate students this time of year, but like in September, I was doing a ton of undergraduate instruction. So it just depends on the time of year. Okay. I think it happened. I think when we transferred it to this computer, it did something else. Anyway, so there are some challenges that subject librarians face, and I'm sure this will resonate with a lot of people in the room. But we are always trying to keep up with new tools like in-spec analytics and resources, trends. We have to figure out how we can give up certain things we're doing or downsize them or put it in, I don't know, compartmentalize things so that we can take on new things. I'm very much a generalist, especially as a STEM librarian. And I think I'm a mini expert, so I'm an expert in a lot of different things, but if I have to dive deep in things, then I might pass it off to a colleague or someone else on campus who's an expert in that area. We are supporting groups with disparate needs, so again, undergraduates versus postdocs, for example. We are always struggling to find the best pathways to connect with people on campus. Personally, one of the things that I struggle with is finding an evidence-based approach to strategizing all of this, because otherwise it ends up being reactionary, where you get a request here and a request there. So doing things like trying to map out where we fit into the workflow is an important step in trying to, I think, solve some of those problems. The other thing I didn't mention, but the perceptions of what we do on campus is really a tough thing to tackle, because it's hard for us to define what we're doing some days, and one day it's different from the next day, then how do you explain it to somebody else? Okay, so this is Vincent's awesome research workflow diagram that I am borrowing for the this portion as a visualization of the workflow. And what I did was try and map the things that a subject librarian does to this workflow. And again, this is my interpretation and not comprehensive by any means. So under the discovery and ideation phase, I might be identifying new resources to support that. So support discovery, and I'm doing outreach and training on those tools. I'm working with faculty to do things like set up search alerts and author alerts so that they can stay on top of the literature. I've gotten into this more recently, working with things like department chairs to sit down and use products like Insights and in-spec analytics so that they can get a sense of how their department compares to other schools and what is their research output and how does it compare. But that's a really important thing if you want to stay ahead of the curve. Project planning. Obviously, we still do literature searches and like research, in-depth research assistance. I do a lot with citation management and things like researcher workflow tools. Data organization and storage is a piece of that. And then something I've done a few times is advocate for software purchases on campus. So things like, I've had conversations with the graduate school about Overleaf and how, like for example, when the graduate students submit their dissertation or thesis, they mostly are using LaTeX and BibTeX, but we don't have a template for that. It doesn't fit well with Microsoft Word. So Overleaf would be a great solution. So advocating for things like that to improve researcher workflow. Funding. We work with our Office of Research we're actually planning a training for the librarians this spring on Pivot so that we are better equipped to support, again, the whole workflow. So if we're in a literature database and showing them where the grant information is, we can also point them to Pivot and at least give them an introduction in that. So literature searches along with proposal development. So one of the things that I see faculty struggle with is context and scope. So they are searching in their niche journals that they're used to publishing in, but they're missing the context of their research. And proposals, you want to really tell your story well so that you're speaking to your audience and explaining the value of your research. Data management plans. We have a RIM system on our campus. We use Pure, and our version is called Experts at Syracuse. So it's a great way to identify collaborators. Let's see what else. Doing things like helping faculty stay aware of research networking tools and making sure their profiles are up to date so that they're attracting collaborators. And being a bridge to other resources on campus. This I'm not as involved with, but we have a data librarian at Syracuse. We're very fortunate for that. And so I've done some advising recently on things like data sharing. So a piece of like citation, it could be a piece of citation management, but also sharing data internally, coming up with strategies for that, maybe a product like OSF, but also sharing data externally and making sure you're getting your DOI so that people are citing it and it's out there. Let's see. Over on the writing side, literature searches, citation management, journal identification. And I put preprint servers there because I couldn't figure out where that exactly fit. But you know, maybe some of their early research or drafts get put in a preprint server when they're writing and they're getting feedback on it from their peers. Okay, and this is the last one. So, and this is, I feel like we do a lot of research impact, but as you can see, I've talked about pieces of research impact and the tools at different phases. It's really not iterative. It's all of these things happen at different phases. So, the publication side, helping select journals and talking about things like predatory publishers and what to look for. So, education, communication there is big. We do a lot with grant compliance. So, what are the requirements of NIH, NSF? When you're submitting, you know, will this journal allow you to comply with these requirements, things like that. Navigating open access options and copyright questions. We have an open access and copyright librarian, which we are also very fortunate to have. So I'm good at getting people started with that, but have an expert that I can refer to, which is wonderful. And then outreach and communication. So again, data sharing there. Doing things like encouraging faculty to put their publications in our institutional repository so they can increase their citation count, developing their research profiles, and doing things like leveraging social media. And then impact and assessment. I've started to do a lot of helping faculty develop their tenure packages. So putting together bibliometrics, so their impact factor, their H-index, and helping them contextualize it in a way that other people understand it, because I have to almost like look up the formulas and reread you know, the descriptions of how journal impact factor is measured almost every time, even though I do it all the time. So the people that are reviewing faculty portfolios aren't going to understand what that means either. So providing things like definitions and again context is, I think, really important. And then again, I mentioned before, kind of in a different area, but looking at metrics at the department level, at the college level, at the university level, and thinking about how our reputation scales on a broader, scales more broadly. So anyway, and I'm gonna skip over this. Well, I guess it was gonna, this slide, we actually took it out. But it's here. Anyway, I can sum up this slide as I love being involved in the research workflow and feel like kind of we're contributing to something bigger. Like I'm actually, you know, by fostering and supporting faculty research and graduate student development, and so there are a lot of great opportunities, and it's a lot of interesting collaborations that we can get involved with on campus. And a lot of opportunities, again, to kind of really think about the research workflow as a whole and think strategically about where we can insert ourselves and, you know, and develop partnerships on campus as opposed to doing everything as a one-off. So Annie's going to talk to you more about the directions we're moving in.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're organizing and reorganizing our particular department to be more in line with researcher workflow. I'm the interim lead of a department that includes subject liaisons like Emily, collections librarians, research data management, open publishing, copyright, and most of them report directly to me, which is not a sustainable practice. Our entire university library is also undergoing a reorg to align with our strategic plan. And one of the areas that we particularly wanted to focus on was liaison responsibilities. On paper, we like to think about our liaisons like this. They do kind of a little bit of everything. As Emily demonstrated, she does a lot of everything, and this is not the way that it always works out. It really tends to be more like this in reality. My group of liaisons is also not large enough that we have very distinct disciplinary boundaries, so we don't have a whole big team of STEM liaisons and a whole big team of social science liaisons and a whole big team of professional school liaisons and humanities liaisons, and we're asking them to do lots of new things all the time. So what we are looking to do in this new organization is to focus around these particular thrust areas of our strategic plan rather than traditional disciplinary boundaries. So this new organization will have a department head with 4 team leads and 3 to 5 librarians reporting to each team lead, and with these team leads focusing on these particular areas, we hope to build sort of more capacity, but also distribute some of the work that liaisons like Emily, who's been doing lots of all of the things, would be able to then focus on one of these particular areas. Oh my goodness, yikes, this really got messed up. So we have a subject instruction team that's going to focus on supporting our information literacy program, which is a different part of the organization. They're also going to work with our curriculum-based instruction services and some of the workshop type things that Emily mentioned, like citation managers, our graduate series workshops, dissertation boot camps, and our undergraduate research center workshops. And when we think about Vincent's graphic and how this maps to the research workflow, we really see the subject instruction team in mapping to the ideation and the writing piece of the workflow. We then will have a research impact team that focuses on supporting the research enterprise of the university at the full scale of the university as well as the individual level. So some of the work that Emily was describing about tenure and promotion, working with our research information management system, activities we do like the Research Metrics Challenge, encouraging ORCID, working with other funding discovery tools we have on campus, and our systematic review service will live in here and maps to the funding, the collaboration, and the impact assessment work that's going on in the workflow. We then have a digital and open scholarship team, and this team focuses on our digital and open scholarship, like our institutional repository, the copyright consultation we do, the public access mandates that we're working to guide faculty towards, events around OA Week, open educational resources, and some other series about scholarship creation that we do will live in this team. And we'll focus on the publication and the data and analysis. This group will also include our research data management librarian, who does statistical software support as well. And then lastly, we will have a collections team that focuses on building collections for the university as a whole in all the formats, and so they do some of the events that we have around collections as well as analysis that we need done. And so what this new organization is really going to accomplish is, oh, and then this is how the collections team will map to the research workflow around the ideation and discovery as you're reusing and reusing the literature, the publications, and the outreach that we do around the collections that we have. And so one of the main goals of this is to sort of begin to build more skills around these particular thrust areas and less around so much the traditional disciplinary ways that we divided our liaison work. We still will have liaisons. There will be a librarian for humanities and a librarian for social science, but they'll be embedded in one of these teams that works with other disciplinary-based librarians on these kinds of projects. And what we were finding was really happening was that we have all these things that we want to do within this group of the library, and at the end of every department meeting, we would say, okay, who wants to volunteer to be on this project, and who wants to volunteer to be on this project? And this is giving those kinds of projects that we're already doing continuously through my department a home to permanently live. And so it's not like every year somebody takes over a project and recreates it from square one. We have a dedicated team who every year do the OA week events, and every year do this big event we do around books and humanities. And so that's the way that we're trying to reorganize this, because we did have to address the department structure during our larger reorg. So I think with that, you have your final slide.
I'll add to what Annie said, is that as a subject librarian, I'm very excited to be able to have someone championing these initiatives that didn't have a home before, and it's going to be exciting. And a great opportunity to develop expertise, like deeper expertise in some of these areas. So we wanted to kind of close it with maybe some points that could kind of like open up discussion a little bit, but these are some ways that we see societies and libraries kind of interacting more, collaborating more to improve the research workflow. So this is mostly kind of my wish list that I put together, but I would love to see increased collaboration on the publication side more. So sharing, talking with publishers and societies about the information they're collecting from authors. What data are you harvesting? What metadata are you collecting, so that it can be harnessed later on in products like InSpec Analytics, or I'm a huge fan of Scopus, because it pulls everything in to the same interface, and you can look at grant details there, you can look at affiliation and authors, and so it makes our ability to support the research workflow that much better. And the more data we have, and one of the things that I've always been excited about is to collect actual physical location data. So you could do like a map of, okay, all the people at Syracuse University, these are all the different places we're actually doing the research. And that would be another great tool for finding collaborators. So things like that, but we don't have good location data. So having more conversations about the metadata we're collecting at the submission stage. So continued collaboration on things like project design early in the process. And the other one actually came out of this conference and some conversations I've had, but helping us tell the message of what libraries are doing and how we're involved in the research workflow process. Because we're not, we're seen traditionally as collections and instruction and research assistants, but faculty and offices on our campus aren't necessarily envisioning us at submission of their publication, or after they submit, and helping them with things like research impact. So the more that we can collaborate and communicate about each other's roles, and then and then we're both oftentimes targeting the same audience, it's just kind of a mutually beneficial opportunity, I think. So do you want to add anything to that, or Annie?
No, I guess if I could start with a question, it would be, I know how much we have had to learn some new things and get some new skills. Is that the same for you? Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. As part of our reorganization process, we definitely envision a lot of skill training going into these thrust areas of teams. The teams are being developed sort of around interests that are already there, and skills that we know that are already there, but we certainly see having to continue to build skills. And so as somebody who thinks about how my staff is going to be doing their professional development going forward, we traditionally said, okay, all of you subject librarians are going to your subject affiliation conference, and there'll be years that they do that, and there'll be years that they do different things to make sure they're getting sort of the full scope of professional development.
Yeah.
Yes, all right.
So I'm thinking that it's easier for a faculty member in a specific department to have one point of contact, like, okay, this is my librarian.
Mm-hmm.
But if you change the structure, then you have many different points of contact. Is there a way to help to get that communicated for easing this?
Yes, so in our proposed structure, we're actually not getting rid of that single point of contact. I know there have been lots of conversations here this year and last year about moving towards sort of the group models for like liaisons and teams of liaisons and things like that. We are particularly not doing that, and so the way that the subject liaisons roles will look under this organization is that they will be the engineering librarian, and so they will still be the point of contact for those engineering faculty, but they will be doing sort of the things that they do for the library, because all of our liaisons, I started as a liaison librarian. I like to think like this is what I did all the time, but I also sat on a ton of committees in my library, and I did a lot of projects, and so it's those other things that liaisons that are doing that's not necessarily the direct interaction with the engineering faculty member that will be sort of done in those teams. So we also acknowledge that faculty just love their liaisons and love having that one person to contact, and we weren't going to change that. And so ours is a little bit of a hybrid between some of the team models that we've seen being talked about all week here. Thanks.
So something that you pointed out really well is, there used to be an author or a small group of authors doing scholarly research and authoring. Yet there's a lot of support, and it's a team that is actually producing that research, and the library is an important part of that team. Are you looking at how you're measuring the library's impact on the research or tracking that in some way in order to be able to communicate that back to your administration?
Yeah, that is a good question. I would say for some of the things that we're doing, we do have some very specific assessment measures. Our university has a very centralized university assessment framework that we map targets to every year that are mapped to our strategic plan, that are mapped to the university's strategic plan, and they're done in a very similar manner across the entire campus. And so you bet our metrics for this year were driven exactly out of these 4 thrust areas that are evolving, or our department's metrics are evolved right out of these department thrust areas. Are we assessing absolutely every piece of it? No, because there's lots of it that we just sort of know, like the relationship things. We know that, and we get it through feedback. So we don't have sort of formal assessment metrics for everything, but we absolutely do for some of the things we're doing here. Yeah.
I'd like to know how you got together for this presentation.
That's a good question, isn't
It
it? We've been working together on InSpec Analytics, and then when we saw the call for papers come around, we thought, why don't we talk about this, because this is a thing in itself. This collaboration is a thing in itself.
Yeah, our library is one of the beta testing sites for Incident Analytics, so we've been in discussions.
Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe this is a question for Emily, but how are the subject specialists adapting to this new role? Because I keep hearing about how stretched subject specialists are. And it seems like it could have gone one or two ways, where you went with a more functional expertise model, where you hired people just dedicated to doing like scholarly impact, versus everyone does collections and everyone does a piece of this.
Well, we haven't, the model hasn't been implemented officially yet, so we're in the process. The teams have been assigned, but the team leads haven't been assigned yet. And I think that you probably get different answers from me and my colleagues. We've been asked to shift some of our priorities. So, for example, I'm the primary driver behind the graduate development series right now, and I'm going to be on the research impact team. So I will be moving away from kind of being the organizer of that. So I think that there's going to be a shifting of projects and responsibilities to some degree, so giving up some things and then taking on others, but obviously that gets tricky. And there'll be some, I'm sure I'll still have my foot in the other area with grad development for a while, helping someone transition. away from it. And so I don't know if I answered the question, but I think that the hope is that if the research impact is championing some initiative, we are going to be getting help from our other colleagues. So we're not the only ones doing those activities. We're kind of, I think, we're the initiatives and we're the drivers of those activities. But for example, I may ask one of my colleagues in humanities to implement the research metrics challenge. So we're not going to be doing all the activities ourselves within these teams, but championing it and I think dividing it equally amongst colleagues. So it's going to be more work, but different types of work and shifting.
Yeah, and I can comment on it a little bit as well as the person who's going to be, dealing with that. And it is very much on our minds of what things we have to have people give up in order to take on new roles. And so that's what we've also really focused on the things that we're already, all those things that were listed on there, this group of 16 people is already doing. It's not that we're adding a whole new list of things to every group's work. It's just saying these 4 people are always doing these activities and these people are always doing these activities. And so yes, it is going to be a lot of changing and a lot of working through like what we cannot do anymore. But our current model is unsustainable in lots of other ways, so we had to come up with a new model, and so this is what we're going with.
If I can jump in there, because I think that is a common theme, and again, I think part of why this is sort of an interesting. Yes, I think it was quite interesting that we came to sort of do this together, but I think the sense that that we're all having to learn some new things, and I consciously use the word respond rather than react, because some things are so fluid you can end up reacting to things in quite an inefficient way. And I think my observation about the transition we've been on, it's quite profound, a different way of looking at the world, and at the same time we still have to do all the old things. So this is quite difficult. I think we should all feel quite comfortable about acknowledging that transition and change is quite difficult. Skilling up is difficult, and how to, after a 150-year-old organisation, it was effectively quite sort of inside out. We were who we are, and we were projecting ourselves into the world. Well, the process I've described to you there is completely the other way around. It's about being open to the changes that are going on. I think that's a similarity, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it is past our time, so we want to say thank you again for coming to see us today, and feel free to follow up with any of us if you have any questions.